making mini monsters. It will make your holiday special. You don't even need a sewing machine, just needle and thread.
Need a quick fun build to do with your kids during the holiday season? Need a gift for a kid, a nephew, niece? Want to teach your students or your troop how to sew? Are you a nonprofit that wants to make puppets for a children's program? Introducing the Little Monster pattern. This pattern is perfect for beginners and uses minimal materials that are easy to find. The pattern teaches 2 fundamental stitches, and in the end you get a really cute puppet that you can use. And if you're working with children, you can use it in a performance. I'd love to see this puppet replicated with a bunch of students and do the Marvin Suggs Muppaphone skit with a whole group of these puppets. It would be adorable. As a bonus, I'm going to teach you a mech that can make the arms flap. The pattern is a PDF download, so when you purchase the pattern from my website, you can print it off on your home computer and make it right away. You don't have to wait for it to ship to you. So of the pattern pieces, there are optional pattern pieces and pattern pieces that are necessary. For the minimum, you'll need these 4 pattern pieces, including the body pattern piece, mouth plates, and mouth interior pattern. Now, for those of you who are trying to make maybe a group of puppets with students, the minimal requirements for that will include a piece of fur, a 10-inch strip. I just chose a scrap piece from my shop that fit this pattern. So you'll need to trace your pattern piece from one side, flip it, and trace the other. And then pay attention to the nap arrows. The other minimal piece you'll need is a piece for the mouth interior fabric, which is for this pattern piece. It can be of felt if you want to make it economical. I prefer kind of like a velvet textured upholstery fabric with a woven backing. You'll also need some plastic for the mouth plate pieces. Since these are so small, you can actually use like a small gift card, hotel key card, something this small. You'd need 2, and then you can cut it out of that. Today I'm going to be using a piece of plastic sign. This is similar to like a PVC sheet that I can cut my pattern pieces out. You'll also need something to decorate the face. So some eyes, and they can be as simple as buttons where the holes have been covered on the front with a velvet black dot to create the pupil. You can use standard teddy bear eyes or stuffed toy eyes. These ones were black and I painted them white so a pupil could be added. But you can also use them just as straight black little eyes. I have several monster puppets that use these just little standard black eyes, and they're safety eyes. So if you're making them for children and it needs to be a non-choke hazard kind of situation, you'll want the safety eyes. Another option is to hand form them out of something. So these 2 were made out of plumber's putty. It's a 2-part putty. This is the one I have. It's mixed together and formed. I don't know that it's safe for children though. The adults might have to prep this. Mix it together, and then I painted it black. And this just makes 2 organically little blobby shaped eyes. So there's lots of options for eyes. So eyes, fabrics, mouth plate material, and then for tools, you'll need a scissors, straight pins, and a sewing needle, and a hot glue gun, which I left off camera here. Hot glue gun. That's for gluing in the mouth plates. Very simple. Now, if you want to go beyond that, you can actually use a couple other tools that would be helpful. Things like sandpaper to rough up your mouth plates before you glue them in. A piece of elastic to create an upper mouth grip. You can also have materials for tongue and a uvula. So here I have, you could just use felt. This is ultra suede, which is kind of pricey, but that I didn't have black felt. But you can also use felt, and then I used pink felt for a tongue. So if you want like details in the mouth, you can have a couple other materials. In the pattern sheets, they have some ideas for different things you can add, and it's all up to you. I would encourage you to go ahead and use the planning page that's listed as a part of the pattern. It has an outline of the puppet, and you can plan out the features. If you want to explore a bunch of ideas, use tracing paper over this planning page and mock up a bunch of different ideas, and then choose your favorite before you start. Once you have that, you'll know what to buy in terms of color and supplies. Here's an example of a bunch of student planning pages where the details have been mocked up, and then you can figure out what materials you'll need and mark those down on the bottom of the sheet. When you take that to the store, you can remember this planning sheet reminds you what to get, the minimum requirement. And this is also a sketch guide to show you how big the different millimeter eyes would look like on your sketch. So which one you'd need to buy based on the size that you draw on your sketch. So if your eye is about this big on your sketch, you need a 12 millimeter craft eye, 15 or 18 millimeter. There's also directions, and we'll go through that in the video. I also have a little bonus for how to make flappy arms. Then the pattern pieces are included. If you print these out on cardstock, they'll last a little longer, but mine are just printed on regular paper, and that's fine. That's what I'm going to use. There's some additional pattern pieces for ears and arms in case you want to go above and beyond and do a little extra. There's also an alternate hand. The arms are actually optional. If you want to add them because you want little flappy arms or you want a little more interest, there's a couple different arm options and ear options. So after you've sketched out your design and purchased the materials that you need, it's time to start cutting those things out. Pattern pieces assume that this is going to be hand sewn. So if you don't want to hand sew, then the pattern piece for the body needs to have some seam allowance added to it, and you're only going to add the seam allowance to a couple different areas. This is the mouth opening, you do not need it there. Bottom opening, you do not need it there. This mouth opening has to be hand sewn, it can't be hand stitched. But if you want to save time because you're making a bunch for a group, you can add seam allowance here, 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 and here. That's seams 1, 2, and 3. If you add seam allowance, add as much as you normally would for sewing. I usually add a 1/4 inch. I can handle sewing that small. If that's too hard for you, you can add more and then trim it back if necessary. So add that to your pattern before you cut it out, and that way you'll cut out enough fabric for machine sewing. In that case, when you sew the seams, when I say hand sew seam 1, seam 2, and seam 3, then you would just machine stitch. But there's some tricks for machine sewing fun fur so you don't get the fur trapped, and that would include taking your fur after you've marked it out. Let's say, we'll do an example. So let's say this is your fur piece and this is the seam allowance you added in. After you carefully cut it out, you would cut off the nap for the seam allowance, and that way, and then comb the rest of the fun fur away from the seam allowance before pinning it together, right sides together, and sewing it. And that will help you not get the fur trapped into the seam line. If you do get it trapped, you can try to get it out with a pin, but if you have a fur that is this long, it's going to be hard to do. And I also want to tell you about this pen. This is my favorite pen. It's a friction marker. It's put out, I forget the brand name. Oh, it's Pilot brand friction marker. The bonus with this is it's heat sensitive, so I can hit this with a hairdryer or heat gun, and these lines on this fur will just disappear. So this same gun can be used for, this same marker can work on foam or fleece or felt. You can erase the lines when you're finished. It's kind of handy for foam if you're doing a professional puppet, because you can mock out features, and if you don't like the placement, you erase them with the heat gun. You just have to be careful not to pop the seams. So step 1 is to trace out your pattern pieces, and the arrows designate the nap, the direction of the nap, or the way the fur lays. You want the fur to lay down as if you were like petting your dog. You would pet the fur and it would lay down. So it is on this puppet, but it's not exactly down. It's actually slightly back, and that's so that the hair falls a little away from the face. So if I look at my fur, I actually see fur sticking out on all the edges, but not as much on this edge or this edge. So my nap is either going this way or this way. If I look to see the way it naturally lays, just give a shake and see which way it lays. Okay, it's not that way. It's this way. So it likes to lay this way. If that's the case, then my pattern piece needs to have the arrows in the direction the fur lays down. So I'd need to cut out one piece like this and one piece like, oops, pay attention to the arrows. Yep, like this, and the other one like this. So your opposite side of your pattern won't have the arrow on it. So just hold it up to a light, and where you see the arrow on the reverse side, add an arrow, and that way, when you flip your pattern over, you'll know which way to flip it. So let's go ahead and mark that out on the fur. Another note is I'm near the selvage edge of this particular fur, and it's got some, well, it's got these holes and it's got an edge. This part is defective right here. And so there's a certain part of this that's unusable. And if I look at from the front side, I can see where the fur starts to mat and look unusual, and flip it over, and I can tell that there's a certain section that's no good. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off carefully. In fact, to make it faster, I'm going to use an X-Acto. Now, if you use an X-Acto to cut fur, you'll want to make sure it's sharp. If it's not sharp, you'll easily cut through the backing. I mean, you'll cut through the backing, but you'll also end up cutting through the nap. So like here, you can see I cut through the nap a little bit. So I should probably change that blade before I start. Okay. All right. So now this kind of confirms that the nap is going down this direction because it's falling off that edge. And I think based on the mattedness of this edge, I'm going to try to get my pattern above the whole dot lines. But I think when I tested it last, if I do have to use it, I stick it near the back end of the puppet, like this is the center back. It won't hurt as much as if you wouldn't want the salvage edge irregularities to land anywhere near the face. So let's see how this works out, because I'm trying to use up a piece of scrap to get the most out of my fabric. So I could put one there and one there perhaps, or maybe one here and one here. I think I'm going to try that. The beauty of the friction pen is if I get this wrong, I can try again. So I can see the nap is decent right there. So I'm going to go right near the edge, and then I can trace it. And if you don't have a steady hand, throw some pins in there so your pattern doesn't shift. I'm going to put this up and closer to the screen here. There's one piece. Oh, I can easily get the other one up here. So for some reason I didn't have enough space, I could erase and start again. There's plenty of space here though. And it looks like I'll have a little leftovers for the arm, because I would like some arms for this one. And the arm also has the nap direction, so that I could get two arms in there. I could get some ears over here if I wanted. Now, when you cut this out, you can either use a scissors or an X-Acto. So if you're working with children who are making this puppet, the scissors is the preferred method for safety reasons. I like the X-Acto. It's a little faster. It's a little more accurate, but it takes a little bit of a practiced hand. When I started sewing puppets, I always use a scissors. So if you do use a scissors, the best way to do it is to use the tip of the scissors and come in with the tip and slowly cut through with little tiny snips from the back side, not for the front side, so that you don't cut through the nap that would be falling past that line. If you have a smaller scissors, it's even better. So if you have some of these smaller fine tip scissors, It's even a little bit easier yet to handle. So that would be really good for kids. A safety scissors probably will not work very well. So if you had students and you didn't trust them to cut out the material without making a mistake, you could pre-prep the materials ahead of time. See, no cut through nap. If you start to pull away lots and lots of fur and you see cut fur, then you know you cut through the nap. So if you use an X-Acto knife, you have to put just enough pressure on the X-Acto knife to cut the backing without cutting the fur. So it's almost like you're tickling the top, just barely. So that's that. And if you have to cut through just a few fibers to break it loose because you were too gentle, then you can do that afterwards. So there we go. So for puppet building, especially with foam, the blade gets dull very quickly. So changing out that blade when it starts to drag or not cut through properly is smart. And then the old blade needs to go into a sharps container. So if you're running a workshop and you're allowing adults to use X-Acto blades, you can create a sharps container by taking just any old jar. This is a bouillon jar, a little big jar of bouillon. Tape it shut, cut a slit in the top, label it for sharps. This one's got a lot of sharp things in it. That way, when the sharps container is thrown in the garbage, no one gets poked when they take the garbage out, the garbage man or you. So we'll continue on now that I've got my sharp blade. Oh yeah, that's nice. Save your large scraps, those little itty bits. And now we've got our body pieces that are mirrors of each other. Now we'll cut out the next piece. I still have some money on my Goodwill card, so I am going to use this scrap material for my mouth plates. It's kind of dark. I'm going to use a Sharpie. I think I might use a thick one for this one because it's just so dark. I bought this at the junk store. It's firm, but it has just a wee bit of flex, which is kind of nice. And the other thing to do is to mark center points on the front tip and the back. And then you could use a straight edge to connect those points. And that ends up kind of coming in handy when you align the mouth plates in the puppet. And then you'll want to label it as well. So this is lower or bottom. And here's the upper or top. It's slightly larger. Now you can cut this out with the scissors. This is so thin. I wouldn't use your good sewing scissors. This is my good one. This is my junk one. This is probably from my teen years. It's really old. Back when Dusty Rose was a popular color. Now, if you do have a piece of sandpaper, It's a perfect time to rough it up. You're going to rough up the side that gets glued, which is the one with the lines. Any grit you have is fine. Oh, and I don't think I lowered that, or I don't think I labeled that. That one's top or upper. We'll cut out this one. Now you have the option of joining this with tape or leaving it loose. If you want to simplify it for kids, I would just leave it loose. I'm in the habit of joining it. So I think I'm going to join mine. And the gap is small. If you use your mouth interior pattern, you can see, and put your mouth plates on top, you can kind of see the size of the gap. It's like 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, or like 1/8. So I use gaffer tape for that. Need as much as will stretch across that join. I usually put my gaffer tape down, and then I drop a plate. Since I have a gridded mat, I can drop it on the gridded mat, or use the lines as a reference, I mean. And then that was a small gap. I use another piece of tape to cover that. And then I usually, let's see, this is the inside. It's going to fold this way. So let's go ahead and fold that mouth plate, because these are our alignment lines are right here. Fold it and put it on folded, and then you'll have, make sure you have plenty of flex for the mouth to close fully. And then open it up and then shove it down in the creases with your fingernail. So now we've got plenty of flex. I kind of covered my labels with tape, so I'll just relabel. And you can relabel the center line too. You can also put a little line where the crease is between the plates. That'll help you when you glue in to know exactly where this glues in, because we're going to cut out this material first. We're going to put a grid on this one, and then you can match the grid from this to this as you glue in. So you can use a friction pen or a Sharpie. Since we're going from the back side, it really doesn't matter if the line shows up on this material. This material is so thick. If you were using a thin material, then you might want to use the friction pen. And then mark the 4 corners, top, bottom, and sides. Here's the top, bottom, side, side. And then you put your little grid marks on here. Now for a puppet this small, maybe you wouldn't even have to do this, but this is my standard practice for puppets in general, because for professional puppets, if you get the mouth plates in wrong, it just kind of ruins the puppet. So we need to trim off the tape here. Guess you could do this with the scissors. I always use the X-Acto for that too. You can also put a fingernail line in there, and then you can see your cut line a little better, and then you won't cut into the mouth plate. Oh, and I think I'll mark this too. This is top. This is bottom. And there's no seam allowance, so you're just going to cut on the line. Those are the main pattern pieces. Everything else is kind of decoration. Now, if you want arms, you could cut arms now. So I think I'll go ahead and do that since I have the pattern right here. Let's see, I'll get my leftovers here. see, the nap is going this direction. So I'm going to cut some out of here. This is I know this looks like a stupid arm. It's just a rectangle. It just so happens if the nap of your fur is as long as this, you will never notice that this is just a rectangle. It's just so fluffy. So yes, you could curve the ends to make it more hand-like. And I do have an alternate pattern that does that. That's in your pattern sheets where you could, yes, you could do a little curve here if you wanted to. It just so happens that this is, you just can't see it when the fur is this long. And my favorite fur to use is Mongolian fleece. It's really, really long. So the nap on this is probably, wow, it's like 3.5 inches. It's really long. It's about that long. You can get shorter furs, and depending on the character, it actually might work better. I have a bat here who has a shorter nap fur, really short, maybe only a half, 3/4 of an inch. And this fur is perfect for him. I don't think I want Mongolian fur for him. He's got the little mech, which I'll show you later, that I put in his flappy wings. The pattern for his wings are also in your packet. You can use some interesting things to make up your face. So for this bat, I used the little nerd glasses at the dollar store. You can actually pop the lens out of the nerd glasses, and then you can spray paint it white and put it in, and then put the eye dots in. And that makes for a fun eye. I glued little eyebrow, like surprise eyebrows off the top. Added foam for, fun craft foam fangs, little fleece nose. Oh, there's his other ear. So I have like the ear pattern and the fangs pattern listed. I also did this at the dollar store. Now this is the little, what is it called? The little critter pattern. So it's similar, but it's for Project Puppets pattern. It has some features also from the dollar store. These are like EOS style lip balm tops. So I think I bought 2 lip balms, and I took the lip balm tops off and I spray painted the eyes and made them into eyes. This is a little like a children's nose that they can put in as a part of a costume. I can't remember if I trimmed it down or not, but I just glued that to the front to make him a wolf. So you can get creative with your features. This was also, I had a pandemic series where I tried to make a puppet off of Dollar Tree materials because like Joann's was closed. This one was made out of, the eyes are made out of spoons. So I think it's in like the baby bridal party aisle section. They have these little tiny appetizer spoons. And so I bought those spoons, cut off the handle. I think I might have, I shortened the spoon a little bit. I spray painted it yellow because I wanted him to look like jealous and angry. And then put pupils on and eye bags. I even put wrinkles in his forehead by changing the pattern basically. So, and the pillow, there was a pillow at the Dollar Tree. I used the pillow fur to make his little body. So it is possible to make it out of the Dollar Tree materials. The fur, it's actually, you often sometimes have to patch the fur because the fur is so tiny in those little pillows. So go ahead and if you want to, just take your pattern piece with you to Dollar Tree to see if you can even get the pattern out of whatever fur pillow they have. If that's your only resource for fur, or if that's the only way you can find it. Otherwise, you could splice the pattern into pieces. Like if you had to, you might be able to cut this piece into 2, and then you'd have to sew it back together and then rearrange your pieces and do a little bit of jig puzzling. But for beginners, I wouldn't recommend that because it would probably frustrate you. So just getting a 10-inch piece at the Joann Fabrics is probably your easier option. I also have fur that I got, like a bath mat that was furry. That's a larger piece. So that's an option. If you can find a fur bath mat, you could use that for your fur body. All right, I need to cut out actually 2 of these. So I'm gonna trace a second. And for eyes, if you want safety eyes, you can find those online. Amazon has them. I remember buying like an assorted sizes box of these little black ones. So if you're a teacher and you want safety eyes for your students, and you could buy that assorted box, get a bunch of different sizes, and then the students could choose from that. Maybe I should link that in the description so you can find it. But I would probably just Google safety eyes and you'll see it. That could be your default option if you were a teacher, and then students who want something different could bring something different, like spoons or buttons or whatever. And for people who have 3D printers who are kind of next level, I'm going to do a free wonky eye, which is similar to his. He's kind of got two mismatched eyes, a smaller, like an oval, and a circle. And I created an eye like that. That I'll share with you. So if you want to do something a little different. And that one needs nylon hardware to go on. For kids, you can just glue the eyes on. I don't recommend that necessarily for professional puppets, but for kids, absolutely glue it on. If they're old enough, if it's a choking hazard, you have to use a safety eye. Okay, I've got some arms. Boy, I think looks like the nap goes this way actually now on this piece. I might have cut that out wrong. See if it still looks good on our... Sure enough, I think the nap went back. I think this is still going to work though. We're going to give it a whirl. Sometimes it's hard to tell which way the nap goes on fur. Yeah, I'm going to recut that. I don't have enough to redo the body. You get to see my mistake online now. Isn't that embarrassing? So I thought the nap went this way. But it actually goes this way. So I could get it, yeah, I could get it from here. And you know what? This is a clue. The salvage edge, where this funky line was, where it comes off the manufacturer, like it's one salvage edge, there's the whole length that you buy this way, and another salvage edge that has, you know, the peculiar awkwardness here. Then you've got your cut edge here and here. Usually the nap goes parallel to the salvage edge. So that's one clue I could have used to help me figure that out. It usually doesn't go across. Usually it's parallel. Now you could make your arms out of fleece if you wanted like a skinny arm. If you want the arms skinnier, so this will be folded in half. If you want your arms skinnier than this, the Flippy's mech probably, the air bladder won't fit in there. So this air bladder needs to fit down in here. So if it's too skinny, you can't use this mech idea in there, but if it's bigger, you can. So if you end up doing a little tiny, skinny little arm with a little mitten hand, just know that it won't necessarily work with the mech that I'm going to share with you. The puppet is really, really short too. So when you design your arm, just be forewarned that it's super duper short. So you might think my rectangle is short. Well, the puppet's super short. So you really need a tiny little arm. Okay, that looks right. The nap is falling down. I kind of want his fingers to end in like furry bits, like that. So we got that. I think we're ready to sew. So the first seam we're gonna sew is seam 1, which is the dart. That's right here. So you're gonna put right sides together and we're gonna pin it. If you match the end of the dart first, it makes it easier for it to match up. And then you're going to kind of distribute the short end of the dart along the length of the long end of the dart. Maybe pin in the middle. And then maybe put 2 more pins in here. Now I decided to use red thread because I really want this to show up for you. Normally I would use a matching thread. For fur, it doesn't matter nearly as much as it does for fleece because the nap of the fur is going to hide your stitches. So, ooh, that's a tiny piece of thread. I'm going to get a bigger one. So it really doesn't matter as much if you're sewing with fur. If you're sewing fur to something else, like sew fur to fleece, then you would use a thread that matches the lower loft material, the fleece. Or the mouth material, which would be lower material height, because that's the one where the thread is more likely to show up. So that's the logic behind which thread color to choose if you're matching two materials that are different colors. Okay, I'm going to start at the dart tip right here on the pattern, and I'm going to put my thread through. We're going to do a whip stitch, and a whip stitch almost looks like a spiral if you were to follow how the thread goes through the material. So we're going to go from front to back, send the needle through. Now the knot is on the inside for this stitch, and then we're going to repeat that step. Before the loop closes, I might just jump my needle through that little loop, and that will lock the stitch in a little bit tighter than if we had not jumped through the hoop. That is actually a locking whip stitch when you jump through the hoop, but we're just going to lock the first one just to keep things tight at the beginning, and then we're just going to go front to back, front to back. And you might ask, well, how far down into the fabric are you sewing in terms of from the cut edge? And from the cut edge to here, it's almost 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch, or let's see, in millimeters, 2 millimeters. We're making it basically as small as possible, but you don't want it to break through the fabric because it's so close to the edge. And I'm making my stitches fairly close together to make it strong. Do a little close up so you can see how far those stitches are apart. And this puppet actually makes a great travel puppet in terms of you need a little project. You could cut out the pieces ahead of time and hand sew them while you're traveling, on vacation, because the pieces don't take up a lot of space. And I've been able to hide a little sewing needle in my carry-on. I haven't had a problem with it. Of course, I have a tendency to kind of slip it into places where I don't think that they'll notice, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Like I have a needle case that looks like a lipstick tube that kind of can hold sewing needles. I could put a couple straight pins in there too if I needed to, and then I don't lose them. Okay, I finished sewing seam 1 on both sides. Now we're going to put right sides together and sew seam 2. And seam 2 is this long seam. This is the top of the head. This is the mouth opening. So from the upper lip all the way to the bottom. So we're going to tuck the fur in and pin this point right by the upper lip. And then also the bottom edge over here. Pin that, tucking the fur in. And if no one's ever showed you how to knot a thread, there's a couple ways to do it, but this is my favorite. It's not particularly COVID friendly, but it's just me in the shop here. I lick my forefinger and then I twist my thread around my forefinger at least once. Then I roll it off and pull that little ball off my finger to the end, and it creates a nice thick knot. I'm going to start at the nose tip here and make sure those mouth edges are right next to each other so you get a nice tidy mouth join. So I went front to back with my first stitch, and as I pull that loop shut, I'm going to jump my needle through the thread loop before that I pull that loop totally closed, and that will lock the first stitch. And then I can do the regular whip stitch from there. One thing that I didn't do on this pattern piece, and I think I'll do that before I flip it through, is mark for the arm opening. So if you do the flippy mech on the body, there's a spot where you're going to need to slit open the fabric, but I'm going to do that later, but I should mark it now. And that is the slot that says arm slot, and another place to mark, it says mark mouth corner. Let's do that where we're right here before we've got this closed up. There's my mouth corner. That mouth corner is going to coincide with this part of the mouth interior fabric. And the arm slot is going to be where we, in fact, I think I'll just snip this slot right here and get my pen through. The arm slot is going to be the top of where the arm gets put on. And I should do that on both sides. Let's see. Okay, final stitch. I made a loop. Oop, I don't know if you can see it. I made a loop by just not pulling the thread tight. And then I jump my needle through. I'm going to try to show you how to do it multiple times. That's once, twice, 3 times, and then pull tight. And that's the end. I think we'll go ahead and do seam 3 here. last stitch. Before I close my stitch, I leave that loop there, pop my needle through the loop, twist it around the edge of the thread, pull tight. And you can hear the knot kind of squeak as it draws tight, and then you know you've got a nice strong knot. There we go. It's all finished. You can almost see that it's going to be a puppet now. It's just missing its mouth. So that's what we're going to sew in next. On mine, in the directions I say use red, you can use whatever color you want. I happen to have purple, and I thought it would be pretty. So I'm going to do mine in purple. So flip it to the wrong side again. And remember that this is the top of the mouth and this is the bottom. So when you align your mouth interior, you're going to look to see what is top and bottom. And this is going to correspond to the top. And it's going to correspond to seam number 2. I guess I could put that on the directions. That this is seam 2 right here. And then it's going to be seam 3 for the bottom of the mouth interior. And this is right sides together, right? So the pretty color of the fabric is, you're not going to be able to see it. The pretty fur, you're not going to be able to see it. But that's because we're going to hide all our stitches on the inside and all the pretty is going to be on the outside. And it's good that we marked the mouth corners because now we know where this line is supposed to align. And we can pin that first before pinning in between. Those 4 pins will anchor the whole thing. And then there's going to be a little bit of extra material on the fur side that needs to be distributed along the length. So I usually hold fur away from my body and then I kind of stretch as much as I can towards the fur, and then I'm going to pin. There's more material on the fur side. That's okay. We're going to actually almost kind of hand gather that as we stitch. So just go to the middle and push that middle section between the pin, these 2 pins together, and pin it. It's called ease stitching when you stitch one side of a fabric and it's longer than what's in between. And then once you put a pin there, you can actually stretch and pin to the center of that and do the same thing here. So all of the quadrants, all 4 quadrants are going to have that dynamic where you're going to ease stitch the fur into the mouth interior. And just to make it so there's less pins, we'll just do 1 quadrant at a time and push all those pin heads in, including our little anchors, because otherwise the thread is going to catch on that. Now, ideally, you're going to want to match the thread. Probably have something that's closer. Let's see. I do on my wall of thread. That's actually a better match than this. So I'm going to go ahead and use this so I can match that instead of the fur body, because it's more likely the thread will show up here than on the fur. And it should still show up fairly well on camera because it's quite a bit darker than my blue. So I'm going to swap out my thread. If you have a hard time threading a needle, or you have students who have a hard time, a needle threader would be handy. Or I've been to a workshop where they have a tool. I'll go get it. A little stand-up magnifying glass. How does that work? Anyway, they stand it up on the table so people can come thread their needles and then walk away. So you could have at your display, or your, what do you call it, where the teacher does their demonstration. The demonstration table. At the demonstration table or the supply table, you could have a little magnifying mirror to help people, along with threaders if necessary. And of course, you can always encourage students to help other students. If some have the knack for it, they can help their fellow struggling students. Okay, I did the same thing that I did with the other stitch, and I'll just repeat it again so you could see it. I went through front to back. And before my thread loop closes, I jump my needle through the hoop and then draw tight. So we're actually going to do that all the way around. And I usually work from with the mouth interior facing me and the fur facing away when I go around. if you don't sew these stitches really tight, what happens when you flip the puppet to the right side out, you will see the stitches showing here in the seam line. So mine looks pretty clean right now. It looks like a really nice clean edge. But if you see a little bit of thread poking out, a little purple thread, then your stitches aren't quite tight. And if you were working with children and their stitches are a little messy, you know what? They might not care. It might be so cute when they're done. They won't mind. This one, it doesn't really have a foam head structure except for the little face plate, which we didn't cut out, but it's this foam skull pattern. This is an optional pattern, but it's really helpful for the face not to collapse while you're puppeteering. So the eyes would be, this is the upper mouth, the eyes would be about right here. And as you're puppeteering, if your face has a tendency to fall in, this little foam structure behind the face front will help keep it so that the face won't collapse, and then you have something to embed your eyes into. So this is the puppets my kids grew up with, and they didn't put the foam face front in, and they liked playing with the eyes so that they could get little expressions where, you know, they jiggle his face. So if you don't do the face front, you can do that, but sometimes it's just that face, the eyes focus maybe not be consistent, and that's the reason you might want to put the face in. So it depends on, it's a little bit of a preference. While our glue gun is warming up, I'm going to go ahead and trace the foam skull insert. And I normally cut this with an X-Acto knife, so if that's what you normally do. If you're a beginner or you have a kids class, then it might make sense to just use a scissors. There's not a lot of precision in this particular puppet, so a scissors will do just fine. Sometimes the scissors won't make the seam wonky, but it's actually working pretty good on this one. All right, there's our foam head insert. And if just for reference, this part is what's gonna go over the top mouth plate once we get it glued together. So we're gonna glue this together. Normally I use contact cement, but we're going to use hot glue because it's non-toxic. So contact cement, if you chose to use that in a workshop, you need ventilation. And in my shop, I have a little ventilation system. But in most classrooms, especially if it's in the winter and your windows are closed, the fumes from that contact cement are going to be obnoxious and they aren't good for you. So at workshops, they've opened windows and garage doors and it still gets stinky. So for safety's sake, if you're doing this as a group with children, I just use the hot glue. And this is low temp. Maybe a professional use high temp, but this is safer for kids. So we're going to put some on this seam line. I listed it as seam 4. You only have to use glue on one side of the seam, whereas if contact cement, you use it on both. And then I'm going to hold it shut until it firms up. And that's the only seam you have to do. So this is pretty simple for a puppet. Get that little tip right there. And if you ever have to touch the low melt hot glue and you don't want to burn yourself, Lick your finger first before touching the surface of the glue so you don't burn yourself. So let's say I want to get that little piece glued right there. Lick my finger before I touch that. There we go. That's good enough. So that's going to go there. I'm going to go ahead and glue that after I put the mouth plate in. So the labeled side's going to go down, and you're going to match up top and bottom. I think I'm going to just do the top first, just to make it easier. And what I did is I also did dry fit it in to see where things landed, if I matched up the lines. And I discovered that if anything, my mouth plate overlaps just a little bit the seam line. So I'm going to make sure that's consistent all the way around in terms of how much it overlaps on each side. So right on mine, it's like right about there. Almost perfectly matches up with the mouth interior. So let's do the top first. Ooh, I need a new glue stick. If you're wondering why I have elastic on my glue gun, is so my glue stick doesn't fall out. I've had this glue gun for quite some time. Does the elastic work? Sometimes. All right. One thing I don't like about glue, hot glue, is it could make the interior side, if you flip through, it might make it a little lumpy. So I'm gonna massage it a little bit with my finger on the inside to flatten it out a little bit. So I don't want that glue to look like little worms or something under worms of glue. You could also spread it with the tip a little bit, flatten it a little. Pinch it out to the edge, and I'm gonna go to the inside and try to smooth it. I can take a peek too, see what it looks like. Yeah, that's not too bad. Side again, and then I'm going to go ahead and put in this foam head insert. So I'll put glue along this long edge, spread it, the nozzle, and then add it. Let's see, I guess I could have a center point there. It's going to butt up kind of like the edge. It could go a little bit over, but kind of butt up to the edge of the mouth plate, and hopefully end before that, before it gets to the join. There we go. And once that's set, we can flip it inside to the right side out. Oh, you know what I forgot to put in? And I think we could still do this yet. A little piece of elastic. Ideally, it goes under this mouth plate though. So let's see. Hasn't really quite taken, so I'm gonna put it in here. So we put a little piece of elastic across here. Make it a little bit bigger than the mouth plate, because your fingers have to tuck under there. If we make it a little bit bigger, then we can have a little gap where the fingers can tuck under. So let's see, I made this about 3 3/4 inches. In fact, I could make the edge line kind of match up with the profile of the mouth plate. But we can glue that in first here. Yep, that works. And then glue that head insert down. So this is not a huge mouth plate. So if a man wanted to, man with big hands, let's put it that way, someone with big hands, they're only going to be able to get fingertips in. Like I can only get my fingertips in. And I have skinny fingers, but I can only get 3. Oh, I guess I can get 4 fingers in. So if you're an adult, you might only get 3 fingers in. Maybe you'll get 4. but it's kind of designed to be kid friendly, so, and cute, and sometimes small is cute. So let's flip it around and see what it looks like. There we go. He's looking like the fluff ball he's designed to be. So if you use a shorter fur, it won't be quite as fluffy. But since we put that head insert in, that the head front won't collapse. So if you use a smaller length, a shorter length fur, it won't be quite as fluffy. So, I mean, he's fluffy, but his fur is not quite as long. So, let's see where we. Oh, the bat is the one that has the shorter fur, and so he will appear smaller even though it's the same size puppet, and that's because the fur takes up space when it's this long fur. So, and then I'm going to show you one thing I do to make it so that the eyes show up. You could put the eyes right over top this fur and make him a cute furry baby puppet. You can also trim back the fur. So a lot of my puppets, I will trim the fur back so the eyes show up. So this one, the face front right here, has been trimmed back before I put the eyes on. That way you can see the face better. And then sometimes I trim the fur along the mouth line so it doesn't get in the way of the bite. So along here, up and around here, I trimmed, and you can just trim with the scissors or with clippers. I did that with him, but it's a smaller area because he has shorter fur, just a little spot here for his eyes. I think I did it for the bat, same area. I used a different material for this angry guy, so that's not relevant. But this guy, even here, I trimmed back the fur in this area so his eyes would show up. So we're gonna do it to this fella. Just as a test, see what happens sometimes is if you trim fur and you trim it too close to the backing will show. Sometimes some furs are like cheaper than others and you don't know how it's gonna look until you do it, and that's kind of risky. So what I'm going to do is do a test, and I do this when I build puppets. If I want to trim the fur, but I don't know what's gonna happen, I don't know if I'm gonna see the backing, is to do a little test sample. So we'll call this our test sample here. And we'll just trim it and see what happens. So maybe comb that fur up, start to trim it. And there'll be like this is shorter, but it's not short. So right now I don't see the backing. And you can say, okay, what happens if I trim it shorter? Do I see it yet? Nope, don't see the backing. So I think this fur is gonna do okay trimmed. Let's see if I trim like way short if I see the backing. This is actually really good fur. I love it when the fur is really nice. So that's really short and I still don't see the backing. This means I can trim this fur pretty aggressively in terms of I can keep the height kind of low. So right now the height is maybe only a 1/4 inch and the backing is not showing. So I can trim the face front on this blue puppet pretty well. Just do that fur trim test first to see how well it's gonna work for your puppet. So I know it's gonna be a little arc that I'd like on the face front. So I'm gonna pull that away. Yes, camera's still running. And I know that section is about what I want to trim. And I'm just gonna go in and use the scissors because it's already on your materials list. So I think I can use a little bit more here. And I know I can go shorter because my test said I could go shorter. Trying to get the height consistent across. That's why I'm still going at it here. Okay. See if there's there's anything sticking out. But we can test to see what that looks like when we give the puppet kind of a shake, if we can still see the face front. So now we can still see the face front, so we have a place for eyes where he kind of looks shaggy, but you can still see where the eyes are placed. And the eyes can go, I usually put them, you can put them wherever you want. I like them close to the mouth plate because I think it makes him look cuter, like his face is tiny. And then the other thing you can trim, like you noticed on the other one, is if this mouth area, like as you open the mouth, if there's anything obscuring it, like there's a little bit here that's obscuring the mouth, a little bit here, and since our test showed that we can trim a little bit and it won't show the backing, we're gonna go ahead and trim the perimeter by his mouth. And you don't have to do a lot. And different furs are gonna react differently. So be conservative at first and then take more off if needed. And that's just so you can see his mouth area. Try to make that line tidy. All right, I'll close his mouth, do a little finger comb. There we go. Now he has a bit of a face that shows up beyond the fluff. I kind of like the wildness of the fur. So it's actually easier to find the shorter fur. You usually have to specially order this Mongolian fur online. I love it for monsters. But if you can find the short stuff, it still works. It's just gonna lay different. All right, there we go. Now I think I still want some arms for this guy. So we could do either the arms or the eyes first. Another thing, depending on your eyes, if you do safety eyes, it'll kind of sink into the head a little bit, versus the glue-on, which will kind of just rest on the front. So you can try on some eyes and see what you like. Here's my buttons. He looks a little scared with that centered pupil. I've had these button eyes forever, and I never think they work good. I really, really, really prefer these really simple eyes, like these little handmade ones are kind of cute. I made a puppet for Peter Lintz that had these little hand-formed eyes, and their irregularity is kind of cute, or you know, that more organic shape. So we could do that, or we could do the white eyes and add a pupil. That's actually pretty cute too. So I am not sure what I'm going to do. Eventually I'm gonna have to commit though, right? Now if you had planned out your pup in advance, it's possible that you are gonna just follow along the little image that you sketched out. But you can also change your mind if you get the components for the puppet that you sketched and you put them on the face and you're like, actually that doesn't work as well as I thought it would. So like these eyes, yep, I didn't like how they worked. And so you might discard that idea and pick up another one and say, okay, maybe I'll like that. In fact, let's see if we can find some self-adhesive pupils for that. I happen to have a lot of them. Basically, this is like self-adhesive velvet. Something in between that and that. So that's not bad. I think I want the plain black ones actually. Or these guys. I tell you, when it comes to easy, how easy certain things are to put off, if you don't need the safety eyes, these are actually easy to glue on. In terms of cinching down the back. So one thing to know is if you give your students, say, the option of these eyes, let's say you're doing a group build with, well, adults or children, if they were to snap this backing on before it goes on the puppet head, you can't get the backing off. So don't let them play with this and snap it together before it lands on the puppet, because it's really hard to get that backing off. If I can find the second eyeball, get rolled away. That eye is, I measured it, it's 18 mil, oh, here it is. That's 18 millimeters. So if you wanted to purchase the eye that scale, that's what it is. I think I'm gonna go with that. So once you figure out what you want in terms of eye placement, I think I like it there, you're gonna have to actually stab it in the eye. And the X-Acto actually works really well for that. If not, you're gonna have to go in with your scissors and do a mini snip. But if you can, the X-Acto is actually a little bit easier. So, and if you wanna mark that, let's see. So maybe the teacher gets to do this if you're working with small children. Just crunch down, not just through the fur, but through the foam too. And if you can put your finger in there and feel the crunch. Ooh, yeah, I can feel it in that piece of foam. Okay, I gotta move my hand away when I do this and then move it back in to see if I can find the spot. Yep, I can feel where it punctured the foam. There we go. I think it's cute. All right, to get the backing on, that's a bit of a chore. Maybe we'll flip it inside out. Okay, when I last stopped, I noticed I could see a little bit of red thread marks through that center front because I used contrasting thread so I could show it to you. And because I didn't want that to show off camera, I went ahead, I popped the eyes off, flipped the head inside out, and sewed it with matching thread. And one reason that thread showed up is because I had trimmed the face so short. So you definitely want to use matching thread in this section of the face right here to prevent those threads from showing up. I mounted them through the fabric, but not the foam. And I think that works better. So if you want to do that for your puppet, just poke through. I mean, you could still have the hole so that the back of the eye can poke through there. But you can just poke through the fur and mount your eyes just through the fur, not the foam. I think that actually was a better solution. So the puppet at this point can be done. You can stop here. So if you did a whole, if you were a classroom and it did a whole bunch of little furry Muppaphones for the Marvin Suggs skit or something, you wouldn't need arms, tongue, throat. But if you're like, okay, no, I want some more decoration, or I want to kind of bring it next level, then you can do a tongue and a throat. So let's do that next. So for the tongue, I decided on pink, and the throat, I was going to use the black. And I made a pattern for you. I don't think I cut it out yet for the throat. It's such a tiny puppet. If you have a throat pattern from another one, it's probably going to be too big because one's really tiny. Here it is. See how tiny that is? You could conceivably make it slightly larger, but I suspect when we trace that, it's going to be the right size, especially this little tongue. And of course, you can make your own shapes. If you're like, oh, I don't want it heart-shaped, I want that bottom edge of the tongue to be rounded, you could do that. I'm going for cute, so I'm gonna stick with the heart. And then the throat pattern. You could hand cut that throat pattern too, because it's really just a circle, and then you'd have to cut out the little uvula section. Because I want to cut that out. Now, since I'm tracing on black, it's going to be kind of hard to see. I might actually use a paste of chalk, or alternately, you could pin this down. I might just do that. Pin it down and trace it with my scissor, or cut it out with my scissor. Such a wee little pattern. So get out my good fabric scissor. Let's see if I need to tidy this up a little bit. Yep. It's not going to show up too much on this purple because it's kind of dark. Let's cut a little tongue. And if you want to hand cut it, my mom was a teacher and she would hand cut her tongues by folding it in half, and this is a way to get good symmetry. Round the top and then cut to a tip on the bottom. That's not bad. When you've got some that you like, you can go ahead and hot glue them in place. See the little uvula points down. I got it in the nap of the velvet. Phooey. I can move it over a little bit. That's a little bit better. All right, we got a little mouth.
Hi, I can talk.
Oh yeah, you're adorable. How would you like some arms?
Okay.
All right, let's make some arms. We'll put up our little bits here. Now to turn it, hopefully you can do it with your fingers. If not, you need to get a tool to help you. So I'm going to see if I can get it started here. So I got it tucked in at the top end. And then I'm going to get a pencil and put the eraser end in. Let's see if I can shove it. Got it started. Yep, as soon as it starts to pop, grab it and pull. All right. And we want the fur to go down. So this is top of the arm, this is bottom of the arm. That's the mythical hand. And then you can sew that to the body right there. If you want to do the little arm mech, then you need to put a slit in the body. So I'm going to look to see where I put my mark. See, it's right there. Yeah, that's about the right spot. I'm going to go ahead and snip the fur. And then the arm bladder, the air bladder from this mech ends up threading through this hole. And this arm piece threads onto here. And when you activate it, the arm flaps up and down. Now I didn't secure it, so humorously the arm flew off, but we're gonna secure, for best movement, we're gonna secure just one of the top edges to the top edge of this slit. We're not gonna do all the way around. And the reason is, if you sew it on the bottom, it impedes the movement. So we're just gonna sew it on the top edge to keep it from flying off. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and use matching thread because this might show up because I'm sewing from the outside now, not from the inside. And I haven't shown you how to put the mech together yet. So after I sew the first arm on and test it, I'm going to show you how to take apart
a Flippy's hat and reconfigure the pieces inside in order to make the flapping arm mech. So right here, if you can see, this is the top edge of the slit in the body. This is the top edge of the arm. And I can actually take the whole mech out to make this easier. And I'm actually kind of going to do kind of a whip stitch, but from the outside. You take a slice. Actually, it's closer to the ladder stitch. It's an in-betweensy. We're going to take a little bite of this fabric and then of the other fabric. It is a whip stitch. It's just wrong sides together. And then pull it. I think the next one I'm going to put a little locking whip stitch there to hold it. And even though this is sewn from the outside, you're not going to see it much because this fur is going to hide it. Once you comb it back down. Okay, there's one locking whip stitch. I'm going to do one more. And then cut my thread. So now I just sew a little arm on. And so yeah, comb it over, you never know. And then the little air bladder can fold in. Let's see, where's my opening? Right here. There we go. Okay, so I can feel the bend right here in his armpit. Oh, and for grooming, a little wig brush or some kind of comb or brush. Get the fur away from his face here. He's so fluffy, you can barely tell he has an arm. But once you activate the mech,
Yay! Yay! Yay!
you can totally see it. Okay, so you do the same thing on the other side for the mech. But now I'm going to pull the mech out and I'm going to show you how to make it. All right, so this is the hat. They come in different styles. The images, whatever's on the front, it totally doesn't matter. It just needs to have this kind of movement. So I've had some that were like Elsa's pigtails that were really long. This is like a shorter one. It doesn't matter. It just needs to have two if you want two flapping arms. And you might look at this hat and say it's adorable. It is. Buy two if you need one just like it. But we are going to sacrifice the hat. There's no way about it. So I cut into the lining in the back and just rip it open. You can start to see the tubes that are in here. And I don't worry about saving the hat at all. I just want to get the pieces out that I need. I mean, if you want to be conscious and try to save the hat, go for it. But there's actually a fair amount of cutting that needs to happen to get everything out. So these poly tubes, there's their little guide here. Okay, and here's where one of the air bladders is. There's threads there attaching it into the hat. Snip off. And you can actually tack the air bladders into the body of your puppet by threading through the same holes. If your little arm flaps are falling out, then you can totally do that. Okay, there's one. Now you can't quite use it as is because the configuration isn't quite the same in terms of where the poly tube links and where the T-joint is, so we're going to actually have to do some cutting and refiguring. There's the second air bladder. And the pump is usually hid in one of the bulbs. See, this one's empty. This one has the pump in it. That one's hidden down there. Okay, got the air bladders out. Now this is what kind of really damages that. We have to open up this bulb here. Okay. Ta-da! Here's the innards. But what we need to do is reconfigure it. So right now it looks like one really long arm and one shorter one, and then the bulb. And we really need both arms short. And the T is in the wrong spot too. So we actually are going to pull apart everything coming off the T so that we can reconfigure the T where the bottom points down to the bulb. And then the side arms are the air bladders, but the air bladders don't need to be, well, one of them can be. This one needs to be a little bit shorter. So let's see. That length is about 3 inches. So have about 3 inches of polytube here. And then you need to shorten this one, so it is also 3 inches. And then push it back together. So now we've got the same thing as we have over here. You can use either one. And for orientation on how these air bladders go, I usually make it so they flip. They're like pointing down like this. And you can always make adjustments if you put it in your pup and you're like, oh, the angle's a little wrong. But see, that's the action you've got for either one of these. Now, some of them work better than others. Is if you notice on this one's more zestier. You can check your connections, but these hats are kind of unpredictable. So if you're finicky about your movement, buy more than one hat, test your air bladders, and if there's one not performing quite to your desired zestiness, substitute for a different bladder that works a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and put this new one that we just made in after I put the second arm on. Okay, I sewed the second arm on, and now we've got some good arm action. If you find the arm is, say, flipping or flopping in a direction you don't want, which I had with this arm, you can tweak a couple different things. Like for him, I moved his slot backward a little bit because he was slapping himself in the face. And then I also made sure that the orientation of this within here was correct. That made a difference too. And once you like the arm action that you have, you can go ahead and tack the little air bladders onto the body with a little piece of thread through the hole that was originally tacked in the hat. So I might go ahead and do that a second. Because if you don't tack it, it could fall out during performance, and that would be not cool. You can also tack this T-join to the center back of the puppet too. Same reason, keep things from flopping around. Well, with fleece though, it works best with fur. I think the mouth area just looks better in fur. Here we go. Give it a test. Yay! Ooh, what went wrong? There we go.
Yay! I'm so happy! Yay, I'm done! I'm ready to be a star!
So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any comments, questions, or whatever, put them in the description below or contact me at Live Action Puppets. I have a contact form, or you can email me, pam@liveactionpuppets.com. I'd love to see what you make, especially if you're a teacher and you have a bunch of students do it. If you give me a photo of your students or a video clip of their performance, I'll put it in my newsletter. That would be so cool. I encourage you to go ahead and pick up the little monster pattern. It's perfect for kids or adults. Go to my website, liveactionpuppets.com, to order yours today.